Okay, so Tiamat, the massive, evil queen of dragons, is coming right towards you, but you have one initiative.
Ooh.
So what do you do?
Yeah, this is I'm a fighter. I was built for this. I'm charging right in. I'm gonna take my greatsword out and I'm gonna swing at her as hard as I can. I'm gonna use Great Weapon Master too.
Okay.
Natural 20, baby. Oh yeah, here it
Nice.
comes. Here it comes.
Critical. Okay, yeah,
That's
roll your
right.
damage.
All right. So that's pretty good. So that's 18 plus 10 for Great Weapon Master. I'm gonna go ahead and do pushing attack because why not? So it's 28 plus
Don't forget to
uh,
double those dice too.
yep, another 9 from that. So that's 28 plus 9 is 37 plus 5 for my strength. 42 points
Okay.
of slashing damage.
Very nice.
Let's do it.
Just like a regular slashing damage.
Yeah, it's regular slashing damage.
Okay. Um yeah, so like you run in and you're like you look good. You're in the zone. This attack like looks like you're hitting in the perfect spot. You get right past her defenses.
Hmm.
Um but when it hits, it's just like it seems like she's totally fine.
Yeah, I get
I'll
it.
just tell you she's immune to slashing damage from
I get it.
non-magical attacks.
Level
So
20 fighter. I got 4 attacks every time I attack. I'm still using a stupid great sword I started the game with.
well I I mean I didn't want to make you too overpowered. Um, Today on J&J Tabletop, we're going to be talking about awarding magical items, when to do it, how to do it, and everything in between. So stay tuned.
How's it going, everybody? I'm Jake, and this is Josh, and welcome to this J&J Tabletop video, where we're going to be talking about awarding magic items. Now, we're doing this because during our Sunday night stream on Twitch, Skelly asked us to do a video about this. It's pretty simple. So if you're watching this and you're curious about a topic in D&D or TTRPGs, mention it in the comments section, join our Discord, all the things in the doobly-doo. And while you're down there, we're going to have a link to the D&D Beyond section as to where this can be found there, as well as this is in the Dungeon Master's Guide on page 135. So, Josh, obviously in the example we used in the intro, that fighter is pretty much useless in that fight. So,
Yeah.
clearly this is a topic that is important, but I'm curious as to your thoughts as to why.
It's almost an expectation that like all players have, right? Like loot is such an important thing for players, such a great motivation, and everyone is always going to be excited about magic items. Awarding them is kind of like an art form. If you're doing it well, it's really going to enhance your game. It's going to make your game a lot more fulfilling. But if it's done poorly, it could actually kind of have the opposite effect, whether you're awarding them too often and like they just become meaningless or not often enough and you're stuck with situations like a level 20 fighter without a magic weapon. It's going to be unique to every table. Every game's going to be a little bit different depending on settings and just everything. Every little thing can make it different. So there are some rules and some guidelines, but you're going to kind of just pick and choose which one of those you use and how they fit best for you because every game's going to be a little bit different. CR system doesn't always work. Same way their magic item awarding system doesn't always work. So we're just going to do our best to give you all of our thoughts and ideas on best way to award these items and how to make it fun and meaningful. The first thing is think about what to consider and know when you're awarding these items. Right off the bat, I think is what are your characters capable of? If I gave Vale in our Sunday night game that we were just talking about on Rare Drop, if I gave Vale some crazy awesome greatsword, what would he do with it?
Well, he'd probably sell it.
Yeah.
Because we're a group of Dex kids. So that's probably what would happen there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, knowing what your characters are capable of is huge because not only do you want to avoid giving them things that are useless for them specifically, but also if you are going to enhance a strength of the group, you might start to set things out of balance. The first step before even knowing what you're tinkering with is to know what's going on with the party. You don't have to know their character sheets inside and out. But yeah, you have to know what your characters in your game are capable of because that's important. And it's important for many reasons because let's say you have a character like Melly, right? She has a specific fantasy that she's playing out. She's a support character, she's a healer. So if you're going to say give her like a staff of fireballs, that would be something she could use and that would be nice for a sorcerer to pick up. But Josh, does that fit? I don't feel like that. I don't
It
know.
doesn't really fit. It's okay to find things like that, especially if your specific situation, if her situation is like, yeah, she wants to do damage, but she would rather like if she's gonna pick spells, she's gonna pick the support ones. That's a way to give her access to extra things. But in her situation, she doesn't really like dealing damage. I mean, she likes dealing damage, but she likes supporting people better. So giving that to her is almost like a passive aggressive, like, here, kill people, like, which,
Yeah, that's
you know,
that's messed up.
yeah, and for a character like that, I guess this is a really different topic, but I will just say you don't have to be making attacks against other characters to actually make attacks against other characters. Sometimes the best way to use your turn is to buff the damage dealers because when she blesses everybody
We
and
hardly ever
suddenly,
miss.
yeah, that's huge, and then Fail's got his like, crits on 19s and it's just sometimes boosting your friends is better than bolting the enemies. Just say it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing to think about is how will this magic item affect the power balance in the game? Sometimes you give them something and suddenly, especially if you don't understand what they do and how they do it, suddenly they're just steamrolling all of these encounters, you know? Like maybe they send each other a text and say just use everything, right? I don't remember what year you guys have code words, but I don't remember what it is.
We have a couple of playbook options that we call. One of them is shock and awe.
Shock and
that
awe,
that's a
that's
fun one.
right.
We also have one called the Shady Creek Shuffle, but you'll have to tune in to see that to happen at some point because you have no idea what that
Boy,
means. So I can say that.
I don't think I know what that means
Nope,
yet.
no, you don't.
Fine for players to be able to like do insane damage if they're using their resources, then that's significant because once you use your resources, you can't use them again until however they recharge, that kind of thing. But if they're always blowing through every encounter, you're gonna have to figure out some other ways. And it is okay if that happens. If you give your players too strong of an item or too many items or whatever, and that causes them to be like extra powerful, there's ways around that. You could start giving monsters maximum HP or treating the players as like one or two challenge rating higher than they actually are. That's probably something that we'll go in depth on a video. If you find yourself struggling with that kind of thing, let us know because we'll make it a priority to really go into detail on how you can adjust encounters or even magic items so that your players will still be able to have fun, do the things. It'll be a little bit more challenging.
Just a couple things to consider. Two things in particular is one is this item going to drastically increase their damage output and reliability, or maybe their defensive capabilities of like, you're gonna have a bowling ball of a paladin rolling in with their plate +3 of invulnerability and their like shield of you can't hurt me anymore. Like, you
Just
know,
shield. Nope.
it's like the shield of nope. Yeah, the shield of Leslie Nope. Uh, the players are always gonna really have the advantage in the way they could surprise you because even the smartest DM, there's still more players, unless you're in a one-on-one game, there's still more players than there are DMs in the game. But Josh, you mentioned it earlier in the intro. We were talking about why give out magic items, and you said players love their loot, but like, there's got to be more to it than just, I'm hungry, give me food. There should be some nuance to the meal, right? It shouldn't just be
Yeah.
this like, it doesn't have to just be that straightforward or mechanical.
It's fine when you give them something fun just to have something fun, but it's in my opinion, you know me at this point, I'm an overthinker. So when it adds to your game, when it's not just a sword or a bow or whatever, when you could take those items and tie them to an NPC or a location or like any sort of lore, I think of like we used to play Destiny all the time. When you saw someone with the armor from Crota's or
Oh
like
my gosh,
Lohu,
yeah.
when you have something like that, it speaks to the lore as well. So you see your character's wearing that armor and you're like, wait a second, is that from, oh, you got this from this and from this thing? And when it's tied in a little bit more, if you follow our Sunday game, which we've already mentioned like twice so far, Owen. Owen of the Woods, he makes these legendary bows, and you heard about that before, long before you ended up finding him.
Yeah, I actually wrote it down on goals that Vale had because of it.
That it was probably what, like 4 or 5 sessions in that you heard about that, and you didn't
I think,
actually
yeah,
go there until
15 to 20
28.
sections later. Yeah.
Yeah, there's build up, there's lore to that. It gets players excited about visiting specific locations instead of just running straight through to where they're going. They're like, it doesn't even just end there at the excitement of going to a place like that. Now seeing glass blades who know of Owen, but he will never make a weapon for them. They're like, wait, he made a weapon for you? Like it adds so much more than if it was just like, yeah, here's this +1 bow, and it also does a couple other cool things. Like now it's like, here's this +1 bow, it does some cool things, and you got it from this person at this location, and there's no other one like it.
For Vale's story and relationship with his brother, who is a glass blade, it was definitely something he could just kind of be like, he made one for me. There definitely was another layer of significance to that, which is awesome. So if you click on the link in the description, there is a chart there that's talking about more or less roughly what kinds of rarity in terms of magic items and what kind of character levels you should have. And I think it's important to establish and kind of follow a typical baseline as far as like what power level items you're giving to characters when. I don't think it's has to be like this like ironclad law you have to follow. I think you should let that breathe a bit. I don't think it has to be, you can't give a level 3 character a rare item because that will break the game. In the same sense, like if you're going to give a legendary artifact to a level 5 character, it's like openly wielding this staff of power and summoning storms everywhere they go. Well, there's a really good chance that that's going to attract some very unwanted attention from much more powerful figures. And
Yep.
I mean that can be a fun story to tell, and maybe it is in some way, and can tie the characters to the story. But that also could lead to characters feeling pushed around a little bit when a level 18 wizard comes along and just slaps them in a force cage and says, "I'll take that, thank you,"
Yeah.
and then they're gone.
That's like
So
Lord of the Rings too. Like,
yeah, so
you
like
know,
you can do that if you know what you're doing. Sometimes rules are made to be broken, especially with something that can be like art. That's not like a typical thing I would recommend doing, especially if you're just starting out as a DM.
I also like the idea of magic items that level with you. And I don't mean like sentient items that will like,
All right,
reason with you.
let's just get down to brass tacks here. I'm gonna level with you.
If you've read any of Mercer's books like Wildmount or the Tal'Dorei campaign setting, you have Vestiges of Divergence and Arms of the Betrayers. Those are probably just the most well-known examples. He really didn't create that concept, but it is the first one that I know of that's been printed in the Wizards of the Coast book, which is huge. But it's an item that you could give your character at a low level, and it's going to be cool when they have it. But then once they start doing certain things or getting certain levels or whatever you kind of, however you set it up, where you're like, once you hit X, Y, and Z, then it will suddenly become, I think his wording is like exalted or what. And there's all these different names
Yeah,
for, I'd be
it's like
like,
it's dormant, awakened, and exalted. I think
yes,
those are the three tiers.
the base level you have like +1, +2, +3. But then there's also all these other cool little things that you get where like you had resistance to fire damage, but now that it's like exalted, now when someone attacks you, you deal fire damage to them. Like, and it does just little things like that. I don't think that exists, but that's just an example.
There's a lot of precedent and examples of like stepping stones and tiers of abilities.
Yeah,
Just think of those things if you want to create your own.
absolutely. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. And sometimes it's really nice if you're Conan the Barbarian and you have your father's sword. Like you had that at first level and you want to use that. It makes sense. Like it's not like Dragon Age Origins when you have Sten in your party. Sten, I think was his name, and he wants to use
Yes.
like his sword but it's
Yeah.
like
It's like, this is crap.
terrible.
It's like, it's
You
gonna
know?
break. What are you doing?
Um, but you know, it levels with you, and it makes items like personal more important. And if you're playing in like a homebrew world or something like that, and your campaign is going to be something that exists for future campaigns, you know, well, 100 years after your character died, they knew that that was the sword they used to kill the dragon, the beholder, the behemoth, whatever, like any sort of monster. It's a sword of legend because it was the one that character wielded
Yep,
from beginning to end. But what items should you give out? There's so many different options there.
there
Before we
is.
get into the real things, I just want to say, don't be afraid to give out like silly common magic items,
They're
right?
so good.
Especially to like a low level party that they want something cool and whatever, and suddenly they find this thing and they're like, ooh, I think it's magic. I don't know what it is. And then it's like, it's a staff. It's a, ooh, it's a staff of the magi. No, it's a staff of bird calls. A couple
Yep, you could
times
sound
per
like a
day.
bird.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
But the
I,
fun thing about that, I mean, that affects things in ways that you don't necessarily realize, right? So if you walk into town and you just see a bunch of kids playing or something like that, and you want to make a smoke monster out of your pipe,
yep,
that could be just a
that's my
fun
favorite.
little a fun moment, you know. And I was so happy when Xanathar's Guide to Everything put that list out. That was a really fun thing, and there can be that moment as a player where you're like, oh, this doesn't do anything, and it's like, maybe not. But just like, I know we talked about Destiny earlier, Josh, what's your favorite loot that you ever got in Destiny? Was it like a weapon or a piece of armor that you got?
I had really struggled through, I think it was a nightfall, and I was really, really angry because instead of getting armor that would have helped me with the raid, I got a duck horn from my sparrow.
Yep.
But a year or 2 years later, I don't know, whatever, we were still playing the game.
Yep.
I wasn't using the armor that I got back then anymore, but I was still using the duck horn
Yep.
because it was amazing.
I zip past Josh and I just hear wham, wham.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh god, it just makes us
Especially
laugh.
especially when like Gallagher came back and they gave everyone the like wah, like that horn. You know, everybody had that epic horn,
Like
and I
so
was there like
intense. Yeah.
wah,
Wham, wham. Yeah.
it was
That's
great.
that's perfect.
Something like that, like it encourages silliness, it encourages fun, and it also encourages creativity because they might use that staff of bird calls in a way that you don't expect them to. They might use that pipe of smoke monsters or cloak of billowing for something that's like so crazy it just might work, you know.
Sounds like a good
Uh,
distraction if you need it.
exactly. Giving your players things like that, it's a nice way to just throw some fun in the game and give them just some more options that really it's not going to break the game at all.
So if you're also looking for other inspiration as to like what items to think about giving your characters, I there's a ton of random tables in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I like to use those to spark my imagination all the time. Sometimes the best thing about a random table isn't that it's random, it's just a nice list.
Yeah.
And you see that list and you go, "Oh, that would be a really fun cloak to give somebody," or you know, these boots sound like they might be fun. But there's another common concept in D&D that I think can be kind of controversial at times, and that's the player wish list. When I was a kid, my mom would say around Christmas time, she would be like, "What do you want for Christmas?" So I would probably write down like maybe 15 or 20 things I could think of, and then she would use that list to think of what to get me. You know, I'm sure there'd be things on there that I didn't ask for, if you will, but that would be kind of how that would go. And sometimes players and DMs can have like a similar relationship going on. What do you think about that, Josh?
As in all things, for whatever reason, people get really offended about that wish list for like no reason. I don't have a problem with it. I think it's fine for people to have things that they want and say that they want it. Doesn't mean that they're always going to get it. Over the player wish list, I think I prefer, and this is kind of back into something we talked about, where I prefer people just telling me goals they'd like to accomplish this or fantasies that they'd like to play out, which is something we mentioned before, right?
Giggity.
Um, So if we know something that they really want to do, then I could either just give out items that already exist that are going to help them accomplish those goals, or make a brand new item that's going to help them do something that they think would be really cool. To me, I think that's more effective and more fulfilling than the wish list. I like giving people things that they're going to be surprised and excited about rather than giving like exactly what they asked for. But there's also nothing wrong with someone saying, I would really like to find a Holy Avenger longsword at some point. Like I'm playing a paladin. I just think it would be really cool to get that. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with the player saying that to me.
That might be a pinnacle item that they find towards the end. You know, maybe they know a sword of legend. I think what you're getting at is the perfect thing. Like, what is the fantasy they're trying to play out? What are the goals for the character? And even if a player hands you a wish list, you might even say, like, just put together like 5 items that sound interesting to you. That helps you understand what they're looking for. Like, if you did that and like, I like the winged boots, carpet of flying, broom of flying, you'd be like, okay, I'm pretty sure Jake wants to play a character that can fly. You
Yeah.
know, like whether that's some kind of ability scroll, mutation that forms wings on his back, whatever, you understand now that's what's going on.
And maybe instead of any of those things, you're going to give that character that vestige of divergence that I don't know what it's called, but it's the one that at some point like wings sprout out of it and you could fly. You know,
Yes.
it's
Yep.
not something that they expected at all. It's not what they asked for, but based on the items they told you they wanted, you knew what they were really asking for, and you were able to give them something even cooler. So, what do I think about the player wish list? I'm okay with it.
But another common way to know what kind of items to give to your party might be filling a particular need that the party has, right? So earlier in this video, we talked about knowing what your party members are capable of. So if you have a group that doesn't have a healer, well, maybe you're going to be throwing healing potions their way a little more often than maybe you would some other way, or at least give them an avenue to purchase them. Maybe they don't really have like a traditional tank in the party, so once in a while you're going to throw a potion of invulnerability or some way to magically boost their armor class so that it, even if they get hit, it's still a big deal, but maybe they get hit less often. Whatever it may be, maybe you have a bunch of people that just they don't hit hard, so I really need to make sure that dagger is a flame tongue, so they're dealing an extra 2d6 every time. This is something that's probably going to be a little more important for like a smaller group of like 2 or 3, that you're not going to be able to kind of hit everything you would in a group of like 7. If you're going to be watching Critical Role, I mean, they have all their roles filled. There's
Yeah.
just too many party members to not. But that could be a very useful way to think about what items to give.
That's really, really important. And that's something they might not even realize if they used a wish list or anything like that. You're the DM, you see how they're performing in encounters, you see that they're struggling in one thing. But yeah, maybe I'll give them something that's going to help them out. Another option is trying to enhance a known fantasy that, a player wants to fulfill. So, someone likes to do the most damage, and maybe they like fire and that kind of thing too. Maybe you're going to give them some sort of flame tongue weapon. So they're going to be doing extra damage, and they're also going to be doing fire damage too. That's going to make them feel really powerful, and it's going to make them feel really just great and incredible when they're able to play out that fantasy that they want to. You're just helping them achieve their goals, and why not give them something that's going to make them excited? you know?
Yeah, you're not talking about breaking the game in any way. You're just talking about helping them enjoy the game,
Yeah,
which that's a big part of what the DM should be looking to do.
yeah.
So, one other thing I like to think about, I like to present interesting decision points, and specifically when it comes to attunement, right? So, unless you're an artificer and you get more slots than everybody else, you get 3 attunement slots that you can have active at a time. And this can be tricky because if you have too many items that require attunement, you could potentially make your players feel like they're missing out on something. But at the same time, if they make a decision to use that ring of fire resistance and then they just so happen to encounter, a red dragon or some like devils or demons or whatever that's going to be using fire against them, that's going to be really helpful and it's going to make them feel like they chose well. That's something to just kind of pay attention to as the DM. What attunement slots they have, what attunement slots are they using? Just be aware.
It's also like it's a built-in safeguard against players being like way too powerful. If the really strong items require attunement, you can only have so many of them.
Don't forget you can always sell stuff that you're not using. That can help you reach other goals, like, buying a different item that you have in mind.
Sometimes you outgrow things and you got to sell them, and that's okay. It just helps the game move forward. the other type of items that are out there, like everybody always thinks of like, the armor and the weapons, but there's also consumables right off the bat. Healing potions, they are considered magic items, and I would always make sure that your players have some sort of access to them. It doesn't mean it's free. It doesn't mean that they'll like always like everybody gets three, like whatever. Oh, we started the set, you don't have them. Oh, well, you found a bag of holding. It was filled with them.
Just
It,
appeared and had a label on it, said potion of greater healing. There it
yeah.
is. Amazing.
It doesn't mean they're going to be all over the place, but it's something that they should have some sort of access to just to help them keep moving forward.
I agree. And you have potions like potion of invulnerability. That's gonna, basically everything that comes after you is you have resistance against it. And yeah, that's kind of game breaking, but that's also really fun and it's one time. So sometimes something that breaks the game can create some seriously awesome hero moments that everybody honestly are just gonna cherish. Like they're gonna be like, you remember that time that Marcus was fighting Cryovane and he was like flying and he had the potion and it was like they were getting pinned on each other, but they were fighting. It was like it can create these moments that will kind of live forever. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the point of what we're doing here. Like, yeah, we're rolling dice and you might remember some great natural 20s, but I don't remember every roll of the Cryovane fight, but I remember the way it played out more or less.
Yeah.
I mean, you could watch it right here. If you want it.
There.
You should do it.
Oh.
I recommend it. It was a fun one.
Oh, you got to be quicker than that. It's all right. Just back up. Just double click if you're on your iPhone, and then it'll pop right up again. Aside from potions, too, you can come up with your own, one-time use items, like a luck point. Everybody knows the feat Lucky. It's infamous, and whether you like that or you hate it, if you have them meet some sort of like oracle or like whatever, someone just giving they see a cloud that looks like a dragon or whatever, however you want to explain it, just give them a luck point, give them a portent, give them some sort of like bardic inspiration or just inspiration or whatever. It's a very easy throwaway. You're about to do something dangerous that I don't want to give you the greatest item in the world, but here now you have potentially advantage or reroll that save, whatever. You have options.
I agree. You can have somebody meet the Frost Giant King and hand out bellies full of mead. You feel a lot more lucky that way.
A lot warmer,
Yeah.
a lot happier.
I don't think you can be too generous for this kind of thing because, the lucky feat is special or, inspiration, stuff like that. But I do think that you should find creative ways to hand these things out. It can make it very special when you do. And some players just hoard all of their consumables. They're like, oh no, I might need this later on. And they're like, Scrooge McDuck diving in like a sea of potions. It's just like splashing everywhere.
What a visual.
You can stop giving them out until they use them. I think that's also fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you want to be a little diabolical, set an expiration date on them. Literally,
that's just that's amazing and awful, and it's just great.
I mean, most consumables in life expire at some point, and if they don't, it might not be something that you want to consume. Like except for honey and mead.
Oh my god.
Really, but
could you imagine like a healing potion has an expiration date and like you can warn them, be like, I don't know, it doesn't look quite as deep red as it used to. It looks a little more brown. They drink it. All right, roll. Yeah, you take that much damage, you don't.
Oh man, yeah, it turns into like the fake potion of healing. Oh, yeah. Or like roll a con save, you might get sick.
Yikes.
That's just
you're poisoned for the next hour.
That's a whole fun concept that I guess
if you're gonna do that, like it doesn't quite look the same. Give them at least a clue. Like,
yes.
Oh, all right, maybe I shouldn't do this. At least at that point, you're in the clear as far as I'm concerned. What kind of things should we avoid as a DM when giving out magic items? Because we've had a lot of do's. Sometimes there's some don'ts.
Yeah, there's definitely some don'ts out there. One of them, and probably one of the most important ones, is not giving all of the cool items to one player. Like, I get it. Sometimes it could be malicious, but sometimes it could literally be like, well, I'm a fighter and I like to use these weapons and I know what I would want. this is something that you connect with a little bit more. So because of that, that's your focus. You're like, I'm gonna give him this because like I think this would be cool and whatever. And the player who's a monk, you're like, I can't think of any items for that. Like I don't know, they don't get anything. Just don't neglect anyone at the table, and don't give all of the cool things to one person.
Yeah, and the example we had in the beginning, like if that fighter who's still using the sword that he had when he's level 1, but the wizard's pimped out in like robe of the archmage, staff of power,
Yeah.
ring of protection. They're like, I'm fine. I'm just shooting the thing with lightning bolts and all sorts of fun things. I think the only other thing really to avoid might be just giving the items out for the sake of it. I think you could find a mix. Almost everything in this video really is finding your own balance that works for you and your game, because some settings are going to be more magic rich than others. But I think there should always be at least a little bit of purpose behind it, whether it's to fill a need in the party, help a player fill out a fantasy, or even if you give something that's deliberately not something they can use, but you know they have a financial goal they're trying to reach, that can be something to consider. As long as they have a way to sell the item or barter it for something they need, that can be useful. But just try to be a little deliberate with what you're doing, I think, is really the main focal point.
I hope that you learned something here, and that, if you're thinking about giving out some magic items, and well, go back to this video, check out the chapters in the doobly doo, and use this as a reference point to help you move forward. If you have anything that you do specifically when you're giving out items, or anything to avoid, any weird stories that have come up or experiences you've had, we'd love to hear about that and talk about it down in the comments below, and also in our Discord. So feel free to join us there, like, comment, subscribe, and why don't you hit that notification bell if you like what you're seeing here, so you'll know every time we do something in the future.
So, Joshua, do we have any questions specifically for us in our Discord or our emails?
Let's check JNJtabletop Discord. Ask JNJ. Crystalina. I have a question about death saves outside of combat. Does the player keep rolling death saves, or do they stabilize immediately, or that question mark? Well, death save can be a clunky mechanic outside of combat. In theory, every round is 6 seconds. Outside of combat, if somebody is making death saves, you really need to address it quickly.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that they don't do that? They just die?
If they failed 3 death saves, they sure do.
I don't know what voice that was, but that was not strong bad. That was like